Ivy Valentine subscribes to Mark Yoon. So should you. Enjoy your treat!
I want to start by prefacing this video that I actually have nothing against the people that I'm about to address and talk about. I am actually subscribed to Matt McMuscles and Maximilian Dude's channel. I haven't really watched too much of Justin Wong's stuff, but he seems pretty intelligent from the way that he puts forth his arguments, but he's not really important here because he hasn't really played the Soul Calibur games, and he admits that on the Triple K.O podcast. So my problems with the Triple K.O podcast, specifically the one talking about Soul Calibur, is they do get a few things wrong and confused, and I just want to clear the air up because it's been annoying me that on my channel I've been getting like constantly hit up by people who obviously watch that podcast and are asking me about it and asking about my thoughts and addressing it, so I felt the need to actually make this video. As I've already stated, I have no problem with these guys. They're usually pretty spot on when it comes to commentary and talking about what they know, and Max is a general fighting game guy, so he's not too specific when it comes to like each fighting game, but he is a fan of Soul Calibur and was addressing a lot of it throughout Soul Calibur 6's lifetime. So I want to address a few things here, and this is concerning Soul Calibur 7. So I'm going to be showing clips, and I'm going to be talking about what they say specifically, and I'm going to address the points that I want to make, so buckle up and let's just jump right into this video.
It looks like Soul Calibur 5. Like, if we're going to be real, it's painfully clear the game was made on a kind of a meager budget. And as we talked to Okubo over the years, who's the director of the game, the lead producer, we kind of learned that about it, that they didn't have much to work with. But the guy just loved Soul Calibur, so he wanted it to come back in some way.
Alright, the first note of contention I have is an opinionated one. Max actually says that Soul Calibur 6 looks like Soul Calibur 5, and while it isn't like a huge jump like in resolution or anything like that compared to Tekken 5, it does actually look significantly better than Tekken 5. Like, it's not just up-res from like 1080i or 1080p or whatever Soul Calibur is running in. Like, it is definitely, the character models are actually different. They're not the same builds. They're actually different characters, and while there are some asset reusage, the characters themselves look better. While the stages are hit or miss, they are new stages. Everything that's in Soul Calibur 6 is pretty much new when it comes to how the game looks and how the game like feels. So I do disagree a little bit with what he said about Soul Calibur 5 looking like Soul Calibur 6, but I do agree that with that generation from the PS3 to the PS4, there wasn't that much of a jump with any game, so I can understand why it would be hard to actually notice that too much. It's not like as big of a jump from, let's say, the PS2 to the PS3, but I do think that I take a little bit of an issue with that.
Weirdly enough, we're back to Soul Calibur 1 for some reason.
Yeah, timeline-wise, it just
never makes sense with timeline, huh?
Was there a reason for it? Was it like Zasalamel created some shit?
There's definitely some time travel shit at some point, or other universe shit. But if you look at the majority of the roster, they're essentially their Soul Calibur 1 designs.
Okay, so everyone is confused about timelines. I've made several videos on this, so I can understand where their points of contention are coming from. But it's not the Soul Calibur 1 timeline. It is an adjacent timeline that is during the time that Soul Calibur 1 took place. And I know there's like a little bit of a weird thing that goes on with that, and some people say, well, is it just overwriting Soul Calibur 1? It is and it isn't, because that was a different timeline, meaning it was a different universe, so it's not even the same dimension, pretty much. That's why you have characters that can cross over, like Zasalamel telling himself in this timeline about like what's going to happen in the future, and Cassandra, specifically from Soul Calibur 4, wandering around the astral chaos and popping up into this timeline to talk to herself. So they're not actually the same timeline, they are congruent timelines. So Soul Calibur 5 happened here, and Soul Calibur 6 happens here. They're like not in the same place. So even though it's going over the timeline of the time period during Soul Calibur 1, it's not exactly the same timeline. They didn't like travel back in time or anything. That timeline actually ended, and this is just a completely new timeline. They are the same characters, but with completely new backstories, and they're all completely different. The only things that actually happened are Soul Edge and Soul Blade took place almost the same way that it did in that timeline. Just whatever they showed you in Soul Calibur 6 or talked about is actually true to what happened. So there is a little bit of a weird contention there, and I can understand people not like going crazy into like how that actually works, but that's another little point that I just wanted to point out.
It's called Soul Calibur 6.
6, exactly. I was just gonna say.
It feels like, wait a minute, but we're essentially rebooting the franchise. Like after Soul Calibur 5, the last thing we wanted to give the impression of is like, hey, everyone that remember hating Soul Calibur 5? Well, here's the follow-up to that game you hated. Let's hope you hate it less. Instead of rebooting the franchise and giving everyone like a new starting point to hopefully like, okay, we're gonna wipe our hands clean of Soul Calibur 5 because everyone fucking hated this game. Yeah. Here's a new Soul Calibur. This is brand new Soul Calibur. So to me, that was always a marketing misstep that I felt the franchise should have like restarted over.
The reason that they call it Soul Calibur 6 is because it is a sequel to Soul Calibur 5 while judging from a different timeline. Like I said, there are still remnants of things that happened in the last timeline that actually affected this timeline, such as Asalamel and such as Algol's voice talking to Ishka Act at the end of Season 2, and Sophitia Cassandra. So like I said, there are still remnants of that old timeline that appear in this timeline. It's not like they're rebooting it directly. It's a soft reboot, meaning that they're going back to that time period in another dimension. It's like another timeline completely. So I can understand why they would say that, but generally it is a sequel to Soul Calibur 5 because it takes place in our timeline. Doesn't mean it's reverting back and it shouldn't be called like Soul Calibur again or something like that, like Mortal Kombat likes to do. It actually is taking place after Soul Calibur 5 and the events of that.
Sometime after the game comes out, 2B comes into Soul Calibur. And like, it's like, holy shit.
The internet kind of loses their mind because at this point, Nier is like...
new.
Still really hot and new, right?
Within like a year.
Still popping.
And it's still an unexpected choice because it's not Jerry of the River where it's like, I kind of fit in. Yeah. It's sort of expected, and this is just like unexpected.
She's out there.
Like,
okay, it's not an unexpected choice to have Nier, 2B from Nier. I've explained this before, how they choose guest characters. I've made entire videos on it. Soul Calibur is different from other fighting games in which they actually need to utilize the cross-promotion to get more eyes on Soul Calibur, and they usually tend to pick smaller games that are actually video game titles, and they take the main protagonist from those titles so they can cross-promote, which means both companies get equal representation and promotion within using that thing. That's why they used Halmaru. That's why they used Geralt, because of the Witcher 3 new edition that came out for the PlayStation at the time, the complete edition or whatever. So like they are promoting recent games that happened within the past like couple years. So everybody that they use is recent. So even though The Witcher came out like a long time ago, it was promoting that actual version of The Witcher. Same with 2B, same with Nier. That's just how they always use a guest character. For more information on that, go check out my How They Choose Guest Characters video, and I break it down completely in there just so you can get the whole gist of the picture instead of just like this little tidbit here. Okay, one thing I hate that Matt McMuscles always does, and he does this in a lot of his videos, he calls it Namco. Namco no longer exists. Like when a merger happens, the companies aren't the same company, the same entity together, just like working together in separate offices. Like they merge, they fire people, they change the board, they get new investors, they like have a whole new CEO, a new CFO. It's like essentially a new company with the merging of the two companies. So it's no longer Namco actually making the decisions, it's Bandai Namco. That would be like saying that Final Fantasy was made by Square. Squaresoft no longer exists, it is now Square Enix. That's just what happened. So like he always does this, and it really gets under my skin when he says this. I apologize if I'm getting irritated by it, but like the company no longer exists. There is no more Namco. It is Bandai Namco. So that's just a little tidbit that I have.
I think, and because the game got shut down, the game got shut down like a couple years ago before Okubo left. And
2020?
Yeah, something like 2021, maybe even 2022. Because we got a lot of DLC in this game. Like it got supported for a very long time.
So they're talking about the game getting shut down, which it didn't ever get shut down. It still received a bunch of patches and update and support in that. Morihiro Okubo, even though there is codes for it in the game's files, actually came out and said in an interview that Soul Calibur did not even plan on having a Season 2 when it comes to characters and DLC. It's just because of the fact that Season 1 sold so well that they were able to make Season 2. So there was no plan for a Season 2 nor a Season 3, even though those things were in the game files just in case. But they always have placeholder stuff like that, so I can see where they'd be confused about that also. But Matt also here brings up a point about how they should re-release it on PlayStation 5 and take advantage of the new consoles. Soul Calibur has only once ever done that with an HD version. That's Soul Calibur 2, which before Soul Calibur 6 was their highest selling product. They did make Soul Calibur 6 HD Online. It did not have Link because of their relationship with Nintendo, but it did have Heihachi and Spawn from the Xbox version. So that was the only time that they've ever re-released a game with high resolution and stuff like that and updated it. Soul Calibur 6 is still great. They wouldn't have put rollback netcode in it anyway because you have to build rollback netcode from the ground up. You can't just like add rollback netcode. Like you can do frame delay and some kind of tricky ways to like make it almost rollback, but in order to put rollback directly into a game, like it takes a lot more work than just like pushing an on button. So there's no way they would have released it for Soul Calibur 5 because that still costs money. For Soul Calibur 6 on the PS5, that's cost a lot of money, and they would rather take their resources and put that into future development of whatever they're working on next, which will be Soul Calibur 7. And the Tekken team is being helped by Soul Calibur in order to release Tekken because they do work in tandem sometimes with each other. Not necessarily Harada or any of the producers, but some of the developers will commingle to work on projects between Soul Calibur's Project Soul and Tekken's team.
And to be real, it sold pretty good.
Like 2 million something.
Over 2 million units. Yeah, it sold pretty good, but it didn't sell good enough. Long story short, these are big companies with big expectations, and the game did not hit a level of sales that would continue. So the sad story of Soul Calibur 6, which is eventually now the end of Soul Calibur as a franchise.
All right, Max saying it didn't sell good enough here is a little bit of a opinion or a misnomer because Soul Calibur 6 has definitively sold more than any other Soul Calibur in the entire franchise. It did sell more than 2 million copies, of which we weren't actually made aware past that, but this was like 2020. Like now it is 2024 and they've surely exceeded that in units shipped. So I don't know why they're still hangering on this 2 million number, I guess, because that's the last number that was released, but it's definitely like well beyond that. And it also is from the VGC that reported it, so it's not actually recording any Steam sales, any PC sales, any digital sales across the Xbox One or the PlayStation 4 itself. So no digital sales are included in that at all. So when you add all the digital sales, like I myself have it digitally and physically. So if you take all the digital sales and you add it to that 2 million number, plus you add another 500,000 based on units shipped in the past like 4 years, and that's being generous, you get like 3.5 million, 4 million, something like that. So it's definitely a lot more than that, and it's something closer to what Tekken usually sells. And Bandai Namco actually gave Okubo and his team a limit of the game needs to sell at least 1 million copies for the series to continue, and they far surpassed that. It was built on a shoestring budget, and they did what they did with the game, and it was actually an overwhelming success whether you like the game or not. So it's not like it didn't sell well enough to investors because they well exceeded their expectations for Bandai Namco. So whether it's coming in 2025 or whether it's coming a couple years down the road because of Tekken, then that's yet to be seen, but it's definitely still coming. All they need to do is find a new producer, which they're abundant out there. So just one producer needs to help keep the team together, and they need to use the same team from 6, and everything's fine in PG Keen. Like I said before, I wouldn't be surprised if they've already been working on the game since the end of Season 2, since they didn't actually do that Season 3, which there were codes for in the game. I think they actually took some of that budget to get a jump start on it so they can start propositioning this out to other producers, because Okubo lasted a while there, and we'll talk about that in a little bit because Max says something else.
That Okubo had told us personally that he chose to take on this franchise because he liked it, right? And he had already been working on Tekken 7 and other big franchises, but he chose to split off. He's like, I want to do Soul Calibur. I love this game. So he made Soul Calibur 6. But he essentially bet his career at Bandai Namco on it.
Also, Morihiro Okubo did not leave Bandai Namco right away. Like I said, they worked on the game for a while. When he did eventually leave, that I covered, he actually just went to go work on Pac-Man, because when he did work for Namco and Namco was a thing, Pac-Man was like his thing. So he did help with Pac-Man 99 before moving on to another company. He actually didn't just leave or get fired. He actually became the CEO of another gaming company in California. So he actually is in America right now and at the top position of that company. So he got a much bigger kind of pay jump, and I would take that too. That's kind of stupid to think that somebody would just leave and then get fired or do nothing, whatever. The director from Soul Calibur 5 got fired, but Motohiro Okubo did not get fired. And like I said, he wasn't getting fired for anything or leaving the company because he wasn't basing his career off it. He was producing the game. And like Max already mentioned, he was already working on Tekken and stuff like that. He did really want to make Soul Calibur a thing, and that's where we got that 1 million sales number from, because he actually talked about that before on Twitter. So there is a lot of misnomers going on here, and I'm just trying to clear the air because I can see why, maybe like not remembering properly or whatever, getting things mixed up with interviews that he's done, because he's done several, why this would actually be the case. He definitely did a level up when it came to working, and it was probably mainly due to his work on Soul Calibur 6 that he even got that CEO position, which is just speculation, but like I said, it over-exceeded expectations with sales, so there's nothing like nefarious about him leaving Bandai Namco. It's just like was his time, and that's what he wanted to do, and he got better opportunities. So that's all there is there.
Like, it does pretty good, but compared to most fighting games, it sells okay.
Compared to Tekken 7, which I think at that point it sold like 8 million at that point in time. Now
Tekken 7 was selling super well. Or had begun selling super well.
Okay, this part actually here pisses me off. So I'm going to get into this. When they're talking about Soul Calibur sells okay compared to other fighting games, it's up there with the top dogs. Like, even if you take the 2.5 or 3 million number or whatever, like, it destroys like most other fighting games when it comes to like Under Night In-Birth or Guilty Gear or Blaze Blue, like any of those fighting games, like it destroys. The only ones that it actually does less than is Tekken and Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter, and they're like the OGs. I think Dragon Ball FighterZ actually did better too, but that's banking on the Dragon Ball IP, so that's going to sell numbers anyway, regardless of how the game works. I mean, you can tell because Arxis never sells that much. I think it was like 8 million copies or whatever. They've never sold that much on any of their other works. So, like Samurai Showdown, like literally any of these fighting games that you can talk about, Soul Calibur's way above all of them, and it usually does close to what Tekken does. And Matt McMuscles right here is like, oh well, Tekken did like 8 million sales. Tekken 6 was out since 2015. 2015. So like, of course, over the course of the years, it's going to do those numbers. It usually only sells around like 4 million copies, the Tekken games. So it's not like they're talking about Tekken's like destroying it all the time. And I love Tekken, don't get me wrong, but like this is just a really out-of-pocket like statement that Matt McMuscles said. Yes, it was 8 million copies, but the game was out for like 3 years longer than Soul Calibur 6 was out. And when you have that amount of time for something to like build up numbers, it's going to build up numbers. And that's because they kept reporting on those numbers. They stopped reporting on Soul Calibur sales. So we don't even know what the final sales for Soul Calibur was, except for like what our speculation is. So that kind of irritates me because it definitely does gangbusters compared to almost every other fighting game except for the top 3. I just don't understand why they would say that. I can see why people would say it's a niche game because most fighting games based on weapons are niche, but it's literally just under Soul Calibur, Mortal Kombat, and Tekken, and that's it. So again, I don't know where this misnomer is coming from that they're just saying that like it like didn't sell.
So we learn like a few years later, Haomaru is DLC, 2B, all these characters eventually happen. They remake Huang into a Bloodborne character for some reason. And
Setsuka came back. Yeah, she's like the last character, I think.
Oh, so they added a bunch. They added a bunch of DLC characters.
Oh, it's a big game.
Setsuka was not the last character. She was in season 2, but she wasn't the last character. Huang was actually the last character. I hate how Max says Huang. It's Huang. But anyway, and the reason he came back as like a mystical fighter is because he was being trained behind the scenes by this mystic that was like teaching him these arts to go against what's the upcoming battle, that being like Algol and Ishka Oct and the Swords and Shepherds. Like they know about this and they were training him for that to be the hero. So there are reasons for that. It's not just like he came back as a Bloodborne character just because he has like a hat that's similar. I think that's a stupid statement to make too, but again, I can kind of see why they would get into it if they don't know too much of the lore behind that, but I'll let it slide.
Now when Harada's asked about Soul Calibur, he's like, ask me again in 10 years.
They shouldn't be asking Harada anything because Harada has literally nothing to do with Project Soul or the Tekken games. He did produce or help. He was one of the producers on Soul Calibur 5, but after it flopped, he fled and never worked on a Soul Calibur game again. So he literally has no say and no idea what's going on with the Project Soul or the Tekken team. Like I said, he's just a producer for Tekken. He doesn't even work on the games. He's not a developer. So the fact that they're putting so much stock in what Harada has to say on anything outside of Tekken is laughable to me. Like, Harada has no idea what's going on with that. It's none of his business. Like, he's not part of that team, and he doesn't even work on the games because he doesn't do anything outside of being an executive producer and the mouthpiece for Tekken. So the fact that he had nothing to do with 6, why would he have anything to do with 7? So this, like, ask me again in 10 years crap is, like, kind of irritating, because it's like Harada wouldn't know what to do anyway unless they came to him to ask him to be the executive producer of Soul Calibur 7, which he's not going to do. So he knew that it was 5 was a failure, and he ran with his tail behind his legs and never worked on a Soul Calibur again. So wherever that comes from is whatever, but like Harada being brought up in anything that do with this conversation is just like silly. Like, Harada has to do with Tekken, and that's it. Like, he hasn't worked, like I said, since Soul Calibur 5, and he didn't even work on the game. He was just a producer. That's it, a producer. Same as Okubo was, by the way. Okubo was a producer, so they help make things happen, but they don't actually work on the game themselves. Like, Soul Calibur has its own director. Like, Tekken has its own director. They have their own, like, animation teams, and like Harada has nothing to do with it. So no one should give a crap what Harada has to say when it comes to Soul Calibur. So when he says don't ask me for shit, we shouldn't ask him for shit, because like he has no idea what he's talking about with Soul Calibur anyway. Point blank.
And like, aside from some DLC characters, it didn't like get a big new mode or like a feature or anything like that. It was create a soul parts. I think that was like always included in the roadmap.
Yeah.
Like in between characters or with a character, it'd be like, oh, there's some parts from this. Or I think there was like Tekken parts.
Again, Matt McMuscle is talking out of pocket here by saying like Soul Calibur 6 didn't get a new mode. I got 2 seasons of DLC, dude. What fighting game does get new modes? What fighting games? I mean, Tekken 7 got like an offline version of Tekken Bowling that you had to pay like $15 for, and Street Fighter 5 got a story mode added. But what new modes are being added to any of these other fighting games? I have no idea where this is coming from. It's like, oh, Soul Calibur failed because it didn't get a new mode. What games do? Name me one other Soul Calibur game that got a new mode in DLC. It's completely stupid to say. I'm sorry. Like, I like Matt McMuscles and I like his content, but like this right here is just completely out of pocket, and he's just showing his ignorance when it comes specifically to Soul Calibur. And I've said this about him before, when I've watched his Soul Calibur videos, like, most of his other stuff is pretty good. Like, I like Neosai's take better because he understands that he doesn't know the background history and he does his research, but like Matt McMuscles doesn't really know that much about Soul Calibur. He may like playing it, but he even says that like Soul Calibur 2 is like his favorite, so like he hasn't really even like been invested in the series since like the PS2. So again, like, he's welcome to his opinion, but like I don't know why anyone would have that much stock in what he has to say. Just because he's a bigger YouTuber with like more subscribers doesn't mean he actually knows what he's talking about. I'm actually not going to watch any more of this video. I watched the whole thing before, and it just gets me irritated. Max actually, it seems like his heart's in the right place when he's talking about this, but like there are some things that he gets wrong, but there's a lot of things that he gets right. And I do care about Soul Calibur as much as he does, and I do think it was a little bit disheartening that like didn't get the budget that it like deserved, but that's what this game was for. It's an application game, so in the next franchise like series in Soul Calibur 7, it's going to have a bigger budget, and that's going to be based on the sales. Also, Matt McMuscle's talking about the Namco higher-ups. Like, who are you talking about? Are you talking about the board of directors? Are you talking about the CEO or the CFO? Or are you talking about the investors that don't actually work for Namco but invest through Namco? Like, Bandai Namco? Like, who are you talking about? This is not like some evil corporation where like people get together and they're like, no more Soul Calibur. That's not how it happens. The game sold more than any other Soul Calibur. There's going to be another Soul Calibur. That's the end if we're buffed about it. And the stuff that I know in the background, like with voice actors and stuff like that, and other developers and QA testers who works on the games, like I can go out there all day and say what I know and spill the tea or whatever when it comes to those people, but like I'm not going to, because I don't want to get them in trouble, and I want to keep getting the information that I get. So I'm not going to actually put myself out there in a position to not be able to make content in the future. But I'm getting a little too upset with this. I shouldn't be getting upset. I'm sorry, guys, but like when it comes to this really just made me disappointed in Matt McMuscle, because he just like literally talked out of pocket half the time with no idea what he was talking about. Max did run the conversation, and he did say a lot of things that were right, but he also got a lot of details mixed up or wrong. And I can see why, because during this whole time, like, he's building a family, like, he just had his baby, like, there's, like, a lot going on in his life where he wouldn't just focus completely on that. He does a ton of different things with his friends on his other channel, and, like, he does a lot, so I'm not going to put it past him to know the little details that comes to Soul Calibur. But if you should take anything from this, there's more than hope. We are going to get a Soul Calibur 7. Harada be damned, that has nothing to do with him. So we'll see, and when it comes out, you can come back here and we'll talk about it then, and I'll keep making videos on it, and we will talk about Soul Calibur until it officially gets canceled, in which it didn't do. So that being said, guys, I do want to talk about the poll from last video. I know this is a little awkward to segue from that, but the poll in the last video actually asked people if they played the Libra of Souls mode in Soul Calibur 6, because a lot of people actually did not play it. And the poll exactly states, in Soul Calibur 6, have you played Libra of Souls mode? 41% of people, which is the lead, said yes, I completed it. 12% of people said I got one ending, because there's 2 endings. 32% of people said I played some, and 15% of people said no. This is out of a pool of 228. There's going to be a poll at the end of this video as well, so go over to the community tab at the end of this video and be sure to vote on that so you can see your comments like these comments are being shown here. Thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate you, and as always, I love it. Thank you.
And thank you.